hybrid 15-year marketing career spanning leadership roles in both client and agency side across a diverse range of industries, from FMCG, consumer electronics, F&B, telco, healthcare, and more, across organizations as diverse as McCann Road Group, Unilever, Samsung, and Mondelez. Today, as the Maxis Group's Brand Development Director for Yellow Cab Pizza and Jamba Juice, he's led the transformation in re-engineering a true consumer focus for both brands, delivering sustained business growth and building a brand, product, retail architecture that makes them two of the most exciting chain brands in the industry. Please give a round of applause for Mr. Mark De Joya.
Good morning, everybody. Morning. Mabuhay! I am here to speak to you guys today about, I was asked to speak about the psychology of marketing. And I found that to be such an interesting topic because first and foremost, I am in no shape or form a psychologist. However, I have spent 15 years of my career in both the marketing and advertising industries, spending roughly half of my time on agency side, half of my time on client side. So I suppose you could say I have been around and I have tried to find out what are the things that work across different industries? What are things that work across different brands? What are things that work across different communication frameworks? And so I tried to simplify. And I'm going to share with you guys over the next 20-25 minutes or so the stuff that I have picked up along my journey. I'm going to start with a very classical definition. And this is something that I'm sure a lot of you might have read about in university when people ask truly, what is the job of marketing? What must we do as marketers, content creators, and communicators? So this is a very textbook and academic definition by a man some call the father of marketing. At the heart of it, he's saying so many things. Marketing is about identifying unfulfilled needs and desires, then defining, measuring, and quantifying the size of the identified market and the profit potential. It's a lot of very complex words and a very complex thought. But ultimately, I think what it drills down to is one guiding principle that I will share with you guys and talk to you as something that has worked both for me and the brands that I have gotten to manage and lead over the last 15 years. And this one learning, when we talk about the psychology of marketing, it's something that is clearly not about gimmickry. This is probably the most exciting time to be in marketing with all of the new tools, the data sets, and the technologies that are coming into our hands today. And I admit, and I have been guilty in the past, it's so easy to get caught up in whatever the flavor of the month is. But I've learned as well that this is not something that stands the test of time, okay? There were questions earlier about how can small brands compete in the content landscape against the big brands? Now I'm oversimplifying. It's easy for brands, for big brands, to have a monopoly on the share of voice and media spends. But there is nobody who can have a monopoly on psychology and meaning. So we'll talk about that. The one greatest thing that I've learned is something that I found to be such a powerful and magical word, okay? What is that word? It's meaning. When we're talking about building brands that stand the test of time and spur action, it's about finding that relevant, meaningful space, because we do believe that this is the brand battlefield that will help us win love. And we believe that the brands that stand for something meaningful are the ones that will win in the consumer landscape and the content landscape. So, taking the textbook definition that I shared with you guys earlier on what the job of marketing is, I've tried to distill it into something that's a little bit more digestible for everyone and something that I find more personally useful. And it's my belief At the heart of it, the real job of marketing is to solve humanity's problems in a meaningful way. It's very easy for us to set goals and ambitions. It's not always easy to identify what are the things that stand in our way. But I'm telling you, what I have found is meaning is what helps us hurdle it. Now, solving humanity's problems sounds like such a noble and ambitious goal. Do we really, as brand and content owners, have the power and ability to change the world? I want to say, it's not just a question of our capability. I'm telling you guys, it is the expectation of today's consumers. This is a fantastic factoid that I first saw 3 years ago, and it's something that stuck with me today. And it's the idealism and hope of Filipino consumers. 90% of them say that they believe brands have the power to change the world and should change the world. And I found this so interesting because it talks about the level of responsibility that they expect from brands. Filipino consumers are more idealistic than the global counterparts. Globally, the number is something between 83 to 85%. Filipinos with a greater expectation. So I will flip the question around. It's not about our ability to change the world. It's about the obligation and expectation to do so. Okay? And this is another quote that I saw from a man that I regard as one of the most brilliant men that I have ever worked for. Mr. Raul Castro of McCann World Group, who was recently inducted into the Hall of Fame of the Philippine Creative Guild. And I will read you the quote because I love it that much. He said, "I've always believed that instead of betting on the new toy, you should go back to fundamentals. Technology keeps on changing, but you should bet on what hasn't changed, and that's humanity. Love, heartbreak, the joy of accomplishment, the desire to be attractive, and the desire to push our agendas." Wow, I thought that was powerful. It's not about the new flavor of the month. It's something that will never go out of style, which is humanity. The problems that we choose to solve in the lives of our consumers, these are the things that actually give the brand both purpose and power. And I'm showing here a very simple model made very popular by a man named Simon Sinek in his TED Talks. Okay? It's a talk that's about starting with why. And this is a model called the Golden Circle. What, how, and why. A lot of times, it's very clear to us what our what is. We're selling particular products. We're selling particular services. It's also often clear to us what the how is. How do we do this? Channel strategies, media strategies, distribution strategies. What isn't always clear and apparent is the why, the purpose, and the soul behind our brands. And what people have found consistently across markets, the brands that start with the end in mind, the why, are the ones that are most able to move the market in their favor. And I'm going to show you a lot of examples in the next few slides. Okay? It's not just a nice to have. Having the clarity in the why of our purpose is also something that transitively gives clarity to the what and the how. And we found it to be such a useful model when we're building our own brand architecture. It helps us in truly aligning the pipes from a brand aspect, a product aspect, and a retail aspect. Now, aligning the pipes may not always be obvious, but once you've cracked it, it's very intuitive. When we talk about why, it's about solving particular problems. I said that earlier. But there are so many kinds of problems that we can solve. The trick is finding the right one that will unlock the growth for us. Before we talk about that, it has to be clear to us as well, when we're building the why, the what, and the how, This is a model used by a lot of classical psychologists and a lot of old school marketing people. How does a brand actually connect what it promises and offers to consumers? And that's something that happens in concentric circles. On the outermost space is the functional needs of our customers, which is something that must conversely be responded to by product features. You have the identity needs of consumers. Who am I? How do I relate to society? How do I connect? And that's where the social values of the brand come into play. What do we stand for? What are our own values? And at the heart of it are the emotive needs. Okay? How do I make you feel? How do we actually respond to this unspoken tension inside your core? And what we found is the best brands are those that intrinsically align their why between the tensions in the lives of their consumers and the best promise of the brand. Okay? And it's something that is quite complex. It's hard enough trying to get to the right consumer, identifying them, but when we're talking about the psychology of it, there's another challenge that comes into play. Okay? A man named Daniel Kahneman released a book in 2012 talking about thinking fast and slow. And he raised this interesting hypothesis on how when it comes to human behavior, human attitude, it's not as simple as singular messaging. He said there are two systems that work in a person's mind when they're trying to make a decision. This is the decision-making process. On the first level, you have the always-on system, which is called the fast brain. It's something that's very intuitive, emotive. It processes life at the surface level. This is where gut, lust, impulse all come into play. Now, below the surface, this is complemented by something that he calls the slow brain. This is the rational, conscious, and deliberate side of the brain that fortifies the decisions and assures people that they are certainly making the right decision. And it's such a complex way to fashion the human brain, but I thought it was so interesting because what you see is a lot of brands that do a very good job in talking about fast brain appeal, no? Showing some new gimmick, some new technology, some controversial stand that immediately grabs the market's attention. But what happens 1 week after the buzz is gone, people forget what it stood for. They sometimes forget what the brand was. Ultimately, they are not able to connect it to the brand meaning. When you build your model correctly, it's something that is able to address both fast brain and slow brain. I'm going to show you some wonderful examples of brands that have done exactly that. Okay? This is another quote by a man who said, actually, the age of demographics is dead. Where we are today is the age of intent. What does that mean? We don't care if you are an ABC 1, 25 to 35 years old living in urban areas. Tell me, does anyone actually know an ABC 1, 20 to 25 years old living in an urban area? No, I don't know anyone. But I know people with certain intents. I know people who want to be beautiful. I know people who want to find ways to improve themselves. I know people whose highest desire is to travel. Intent is a much more fascinating way to tackle the psychology of our brands. Okay? And ultimately, we believe that the most powerful tool in unlocking this kind of problem to solve is an insight. It's something that people don't talk so much about these days, no? Because people are talking about new channel strategies, digital tools. There's not as much conversation today on insighting as there was 5 to 8 years ago. Okay? When you crack that wonderful insight, this is what surfaces the tension that allows us to solve the problem and deliver ultimately what is the right solution. And just to make it very clear, everyone on the common ground, it's truly just delivering what is that penetrating truth about consumers, their aspirations, something that just absolutely begs to be resolved. And when trying to find that tension, we have to make it clear there's a very big difference between observations and insights. Observations are surface level. detected by the senses, and very objective, whereas something inside is something that is processed. It demands a lot of action. It's something that might be intuitive, but when you crack it, it's something that just absolutely begs you to solve. This is a very cute model that one of my earlier mentors said. If you want to get to that psychology and get the right tension for our consumers, it starts with asking 3 questions. Question number 1, why? Question number 2, why? And question number 3 is why. It's such a useful tool that helps you transform an observation into an insight. Okay? The most meaningful insights are the ones that are just loaded with tension. And these are the ones that actually spur our consumers to change behavior and act. Okay? I'll show you a quick video. This is something that happened in a market. This was in Romania about 2015. I have purposely chosen older cases to show you guys, just to show that even in this day and age, when the technological landscape has changed, the meaning has never become obsolete. And I'll help you decipher this after.
For Romania. It's a genuine Romanian chocolate bar wrapped in the national flag since 1964. Its strong taste is well known for offering strong sensations.
Tovarășă, nu tolerăm așa ținută de religion pentru tineriatul comunist. Luați-o!
The problem was that for the young, Rom was starting to become meaningless. Even worse, the economic and political crisis brought Romania's morale to a new low.
În primul rând este vorba de reducerea fondului de salarii cu 25%.
Young people now think that everything about Romania is just wrong. They actually believe they can make something of themselves only by going to another country. Things were not good for a chocolate with the national flag on it. The solution was radical. Our only shot with the young was not to follow them blindly, but to challenge their national ego. Next thing, we triggered a hot public debate by changing the well-known Rom overnight from this to this. The new Rom came with its own launch campaign, in English.
We Americans know what stars. We have stars on our flag. We reach the stars when we put them out on the moon. Now, Rom's a star too. How? We replaced the Romanian flag with the American one, so Romanians can shine on too. Try the new Rom with the American flag with the taste of coolness.
Suntem români, n-avem nevoie să îmbrăcăm un produs românesc într-un stil american ca să fie bun.
Chiar frustrat pentru că e simbolul nostru național.
Chiar nu mi se pare corect față de țara noastră, știi?
The outdoors surprised the Romanians with even more annoying punchlines. It looked like an American takeover. The ads directed everybody to the campaign's website and Facebook page to join the debates. People assaulted the internet by the thousands to defend the Romanian flag and values. More than 10 causes started simultaneously on Facebook, dozens of blogs commented, and YouTube filmed fought for the old Rom.
I live in Romania. I drive a Romanian car. And I eat the most traditional Romanian chocolate bar Rom. Then why the fuck am I speaking English?
Moreover, supporters even organized a flag.
You don't need to see the rest of the video, and I'll be frank, I don't care so much what the actual channel strategy was. But what we saw is a brand that unlocked such a powerful and potent tension. And that's what guided everything. It started with a basic observation: Romanian youth are no longer eating Rom. Why? Because American brands are cooler. Why? Because Rom reminds them of Romania. Why? Romania is all about oppression and conformity. So ultimately, the insight that unlocked is eating a Rom bar reminds me of everything I will never be. And that is what fueled the material. It was never about them saying, let's change the packaging. It was never about them saying, let's find a way to trigger user-generated content. It was about surfacing this tension right from the start. Now, the best product doesn't always win, but the great insight can help. Now, my daughter is a Mac head, okay? She loves anything Apple. When she turned 13 years old, we said, it's about time you had a proper laptop. And we had a choice. We could get her a generic Dell, okay? But she says no. She wants a MacBook. But the Dell has much better specs. She wanted a MacBook. There is something that is so the time. You might think technology is one where people will obsess and talk about specs. But Apple unlocked a magical space where they spoke to the fast brain, which is they wanted the lust, they wanted the branding, they wanted the imagery. Okay? I want the most bang for my buck versus an artist's inspiration starts with this tool. That is a tension that acted. And when we talk about these tensions, it can come from so many different sources. Insights can be rooted from an awareness across many things. So I do challenge you all as marketers and brand champions, step away from the desk and the cubicle. These are the many sources that you can get your learnings. Whether it's the consumer world, category insights, from within your company itself, connections or how people interact and connect with your category, or even cultural insights. These are things that a brand can harness to pull together the magic of their psychology. Now, the most interesting insights we found come from interesting collisions. And I'm telling you, when I was on the agency side, I received some truly terrible briefs from my clients, where they will say things as obvious and as passé as a mother wants to show her love for her family. My God, how many times can you say that? Teens want to spend and bond time with their barkada. Everyone says that. When we want to get that tension, it's really about connecting two things. Okay? In the case of an example, these guys said, BO makes people judge me. They banged that up against another insight that said the first day of school is when reputations are formed. When they found that wonderful overlap, that's when they came to this powerful thing. BO on the first day of school will brand me as a loser for life. Who is this brand? Arizona. No one else could talk about this space because of the uniqueness of the tension and insight that they unlocked. Okay? Here's another brand. Tell me if you can guess it. When the bass drops, I feel like a piece. Versus if my pre-game ritual is off, my whole game suffers. Music lets me win the game before the game. This is wonderful work done by Beats. Helps you get in the zone, win the game before the game. One more example. Fried chicken is the ultimate dude food, especially when eating with my hands. Overlapped with grossness is a badge of honor among dudes. You bang it up together, you come up with a learning like real dude food doesn't care about manners, which led to something which when I first saw it, my fast brain said, this is the most disgusting thing I've ever said. But then I processed and said, I want this. What is it? KFC Double Down. Honestly, it's disgusting. But the tension that it created is something that fascinated the market. Now when you have that intersection between the insight and the best promise of the brand, that's when you're able to actually create what is the platform that is going to launch the content. Okay? It always has to be that intersection. That intersection is what gives our content both magic and meaning. Okay? I won't show you the example, everyone knows this, but it's the insight to me. The way society presents beauty makes it hard for me to believe I'm beautiful, versus the promise, made with 1/4 moisturizing cream, it enhances your natural beauty, not masks it, which leads to the tension of you're more beautiful than you think. Okay? I want to close this particular presentation with a case of how this worked for us in the Maxis Group, particularly for the Yellow Cab brand, where we had to ask ourselves, what's the meaning that we, as a pizza brand, can bring to the world? And on the outside, you have to realize that's such an absurd question. How can a pizza brand change the world? I think we found a very interesting way to do it, and something that has been able to deliver high double-digit growth for us in sales, as well as tripling our own engagement. So it's something that we said, let's look at culture today. I'm looking at you guys. You guys are so young and energetic and ambitious. But a few years back, you had all this bad rap coming that said, today's generation, they're so lazy, they're so entitled, selfie ng selfie, they're so in love with themselves. People call you guys the me generation. We said that's unfair. There's something that we can discover when we look at the heroes of today's generation. Now, these are men like Mark Zuckerberg, men like Elon Musk. Today, they are not exactly in the best of life in today's media, but these are guys who demonstrated one fundamental overlap. And that is hunger. Hunger. We disagree with the point of view that today's generation is the laziest, most entitled generation. We believe that actually this is the hungriest generation. And when we got into this space, it's something that really excited us. Because when we looked into the quotes of modern day philosophers, the culture that surrounded our consumers, when we look at quotes from men like Steve Jobs, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Will Smith, The Rock, these are all my personal heroes, by the way. They were talking about this fundamental cultural value of hunger. And he said, that is such an interesting space to unlock. Okay? And so we came up with a brand response that said, our brand must be the one to talk about hunger. If you've ever seen a yellow cab pizza, you know it's something fascinating because up until the yellow cab came along, most people had never even seen an 18-inch pizza. Most people had never ever seen edge-to-edge toppings. People had never ever heard of such a thing as unlimited pizza. Yellow cab, we believe, is something that was uniquely positioned to talk about hunger because of all of this. And that's why we came up with this sort of manifesto to talk about what is our point of view in the world and what is the tension that we want to address. Could you play the video, please?
For thousands of years, man has pushed the impossible. Why are we so unstoppable? It's because we are hungry. Hungry is the story of men and women and teens. Teens are always hungry, especially in front of a screen. Hungry brought us fire, and eventually the microwave. Hungry took us to the moon, took gravity as a suggestion, then saw Everest and said, let's go. Hungry built civilizations and cities in 8-bit, on spreadsheets, and on rock and roll. Hungry shopped for Christmas in September and makes it a contact sport. Hungry invented the selfie, then broke the internet. Yeah, Hungry made game famous. Hungry is genius. Hungry is limitless. But what fuels it? It's gotta be pizza. Yellow Cab, we fuel the hungry.
And this is something that truly guided our own efforts. The tension to position ourselves outside of being a traditional food brand into a brand that stood for the cultural psychology on how hunger is what defines greatness. And where we're positioning our own brand is the fueler of that hunger. I'll show you just a couple more videos to show you how this tension is something that resonated and something that was able to actually define our brand communications, our product development, our own retail strategy. We said, let's uncover the most overlooked and hungriest members of society. Case in point, this guy. Play video, please.
I'm an enigma, and I'm always fucking hungry. I decided to put up what's known as the flip-flop athlete because I was hungry for more of the local scene to be appreciated. Some people will think that battle rap is all about vulgarity, cursing each other. My intention would be to show them, like, no, it's not about that. It's all about creativity. There's a literary aspect to it. It started flip-flop off money that I borrowed from a friend. I never thought there would be this many people on board helping enrich this entire culture. But when it comes to work, at least for me, it's about efficiency. I'd rather spend like 3 minutes on the telephone, order a pizza. Like if I cook, it's gonna be like 40 minutes to 1 hour and a half that could otherwise be spent on working. My hunger has taken me to all sorts of places I never would have imagined. Hunger is usually what, not being lazy, not being content with what it is today. I guess I stay hungry, reaching my aspirations. fighting for what's ideal. Yeah, it's either do or die. It's quit or keep on. There's no stopping the hungry.
There's something that we chose to stand for. The tension is all about celebrating and fueling the hunger of today's generation. I will close with one last video, just to show you how we can apply this over a multiple range of segments and target consumers.
An enigma.
Everything we love began from someone's deep hunger.
That movie that left you shook, it's there because the filmmaker just had to tell a story.
That song that made you stop and think, hey, that's my life.
Spun by a musician who was going through the same thing. The contact sport you can't stop watching, made possible by badass wrestlers' hunger to be in that ring.
We're a hungry generation and we don't sit down and wait.
We sit around and think. We go out there and make things happen, even though we have no clue how to do it.
We're hungry.
And nothing.
Not a bloody forehead.
Or any pain.
Or any heartbreak.
Or any naysayers.
Can stop us from the pursuit of our dreams.
Hunger is our secret.
Hunger makes us unstoppable. We win our hunger to battle, to play ball, to make body art,
To tell stories.
To rap.
To make music.
to make wearable art.
To satisfy.
Satisfy the hunger of others too.
Because in the end, it's being hungry to fuel the will.
So that's the work behind Yellow Cab, and I just want to leave you with these 4 headlines before we close. Number 1, know your why. That means knowing what is that cultural tension that our brands are designed to solve. Number 2, don't get caught up in the gadgets and gimmickry. What will drive our brands and make them immortal is humanity. Humanity above all. Number 3, make sure you're connecting the dots. The brand resolution must always be clean and obvious. Number 4, of course, I have to sell my own agenda. Guys, please feel free to drop by any Yellow Cab and eat more pizza. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. Telling you all, stay hungry. If you have questions, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and DJ Superstar.
All right, Mark, thank you. But we have some questions. I know these guys are hungry for those answers. Let's see the first one. All right, text your questions to 0917589971. Mark, is the expectation to change the world similar in B2B marketing psychology? How can small B2B brands touch clients who are most of the time rational and less emotional?
That is a very fair question and something that was also asked of me when I was once upon a time in the agency world and I had a B2B client. I had a hell of a time trying to sell this kind of framework to them. Sabi nila, iba ang concerns ng B2B versus B2C. Ultimately, when we're talking about changing the world, if you'll remember, I talked about resolution of problems, identification of tensions. These are things that are relevant and true, whether you are an individual consumer or a stakeholder on the B2B side. A procurement manager has certain tensions that they have to solve. An HR manager, a construction engineer, industrial engineer. There's a tension that exists in everything. And I suppose when I say change the world, it doesn't mean kumbaya, holding hands, let's all be happy together. Changing the world talks about finding a way that your brand can provide a way to be provocative, useful, interesting, or actively helpful. No? So changing the world truly is based on understanding what is this one core tension that we need to solve, and what is the right response. The right response isn't always to give an inspirational message of hope. No? I understand that. The response is to solve that problem, whatever that might be.
Fair enough. Let's see the next one. Mark, Max's group has different brands. If demographics is not as important, how do you segment your market?
Yeah, that's actually something that has been a long-standing conversation within the group, right? Because for the longest time, it's a group that has been built through a model of acquisition, right? Today, it's a group of 14 brands, Some of them are homegrown and built, like Max's restaurant itself, or Max's Corner Bakery. The rest are brands that were acquired, Pancake House, Yellow Cab, or you have global franchisers, which is Krispy Kreme, Jamba Juice. No? So obviously, there's this huge disconnect in the specific demographics across each one. So we said it's useless to even talk about demographics because I have a 55-year-old couple, empty nesters, who are going to patronize a Max's restaurant. At the same time, I have 22-year-old hipster indie rock band members who want to eat in a yellow cab. Okay? We said this is something that is going to be such an interesting challenge for us. Which is why truly we said we have to invest and convert our company from being one that is product-driven. And honestly, if you look at the food industry today, a lot of the brands out there are very food-driven, very product-driven. What are you famous for? I'm famous for my ensaymada. I'm famous for my pizza, for my steaks. We said that is not the way that we are going to be famous. Our segmentation is something that is based directly on human need. Okay? So we have invested in a research tool that will help us really distribute the brands in a meaningful way that doesn't overlap with each other. And when we built this model, we said demographics go entirely out the window. Okay? It's all about psychology. It's all about need states. It's all about different intentions. Okay? So there, we found that the demographics would have been irrelevant. So we said let's go deeper. The way that our brands are segmented is based on what are the tensions and what are the needs. It's been working for us.
Mark, see the next question. For existing international brands that have limited budget, what can be done to build relevant brand awareness? Company has been around for 32 years, but awareness still seems to be lacking.
Okay, sige. One of the things that I raised earlier, it's easy for big brands with big budgets to monopolize mind share of voice, and thereby, honestly, I'm exaggerating, but awareness is the easiest thing to buy. You just need budget. But on the other hand, I also said, nobody has a monopoly on coming up with a great meaning. No one has a monopoly on coming up with a great idea. And I'll use an example from a few years back when I was still in the agency world. You might have heard about some Filipino brand named Jollibee. I'm sure you've heard of that, right, guys? Okay. When they first launched their annual Valentine's Hugot campaign, the press release was, it reached X million impressions, X number of shares. It was fantastic numbers, industry-leading numbers. And what the brand said is this was authentically organic. Imagine that. This is a campaign that was able to get that kind of viral organic reach with no budget behind it, apart from production. And that for me is a hopeful message because anyone could have come up with that kind of tension. Anyone would have talked about lost love. I don't need a multi-million peso budget to define a meaning for my brand. So that connects to the content. There's obviously a bigger challenge because obviously a smaller brand is not going to have the media resources behind it. It's not going to have the built-in brand awareness and brand equity. So that means you have to try a little bit harder, but I believe that there's a lot of reason for hope because there is no monopoly on meaning. That great idea, which is built on this great cultural tension, is something that gives everyone the right to succeed.
That was interesting. Mark, thank you. Let's see another one. For the Max's Group, how do you measure your ROI for your content? Is through hard metrics, likes, or by other means?
I think this is a question that changes, the answer changes depending on the digital maturity of the organizations, okay? I have gotten to service the market-leading multinationals like Unilever and Nestle with their very advanced high-level proprietary metrics, which obviously I cannot share at this point. It's not my tool. It's not my tool. At the same time, we have other brands who may have jumped on the content bandwagon maybe just 3 years ago. So there are very many different ways to measure it. No? Obviously, people will say reach is not important. Views are not as important as they once were because that's stuff that you can buy. What we want to get to at the heart of it is what is the natural engagement? What are the shares? I care a lot more about shares and engagement than I do about reach. Because that tells me this is the fuel for a bigger fire. And that's something that we find very useful. Okay?
Thank you, Mark. Those are the questions. Everybody, let's give another round of applause for Mark. Mark, before you step down from that stage, we have a token of appreciation, a visual summary of what we have discussed, courtesy of our exhibitor there, Pushpin. Right, they have an exact look. And everyone, please join Mark for a groovy. Why would you join our delegates for a groovy?